Today, we see if gamers enjoyed popping zombie heads or lost their way in the quarantine zone. Let's find out if anyone played Dying Light. First, I want to say thank you to all the new viewers on the channel. The response over the last few videos has been tremendous, and it really does mean a lot to feel the outpouring of support for these videos and our little channel, so thank you all very much. Now let's get started. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I am BD, and this is Did Anyone Play? A series where we investigate, analyze, and determine the truth about how much gamers have actually played a game like Dying Light. How do we do this? We use trophy and achievement milestones within games and then compare those results to an ever-growing database to evaluate and rank games compared to the rest of the industry. Using objective data and statistical comparisons, we can draw conclusions. We aren't reviewing the game in a traditional sense. Our goal is to provide analysis that can be better used to understand player preference while ignoring game sales and hype to ensure we see reality as it truly is. Please drop a like or a sub to the channel if you want more of these types of videos. We're just starting out, so anything you can do is very much appreciated. And a quick spoiler warning as we may be talking about some elements of late game progression. So let's find out if anyone actually played Dying Light on Xbox, PS4, and Steam. Remember that all percentages we'll be talking about here come from the total number of players that actually launched and or played the game, not bought the game. So these results are a full reflection on how players played Dying Light. The first milestone that players will reach is called Is It Really Necessary? This milestone is achieved once a player kills their first infected. Simple and straightforward. So how many players made it to this first very early milestone for Dying Light? On Xbox, 74.8% of players got to this first milestone. PS4, 94.9%, and for Steam it was 94.5%. So let's pause here to evaluate. Steam and PlayStation are off to the start you would expect. In a game about killing infected, there's very little drop off to reach this milestone. But for Xbox, we see that a quarter of players never make a kill. That's a scary start for a game on Xbox, but a great start on the other platforms. We'll have to see how this plays out. Here's a quick look in graph form, and I put the database average up there. Steam and PS4 are above the average for milestone 1, so that's good, while low, Xbox is sitting right around the average for the database. So what is Dying Light? It's a survival horror game set in a post-apocalyptic open world. You play as an undercover agent named Kyle who is sent to infiltrate a quarantine zone. There's a day and night cycle that's very important to gameplay, as during the day the zombies are slow and less dangerous, but at night they become more aggressive. It allows players to make quick fight or flight decisions, and the game's parkour system plays heavily into that gameplay loop. It was developed by Techland and published by Warner Brothers. Dying Light released for all platforms in January of 2015. The second milestone all players would likely reach is called Flight of the Crane. This is awarded after a player completes the first story mission, where at the end you jump from the crane. So for Steam, 90.5% of players made it this far. PS4 is at 91.7%, and Xbox is at 72.3%. So across all platforms, this is a great hold. Very little player loss here, and that's great to see. So it's always good to understand the competition a game was up against when it launched. What was happening around January 27th, 2015 in the gaming world? Well, titles like Evolve, Saints Row: Gat Out of Hell, and Resident Evil HD Remaster came out around this times on the platforms. Looking at Google Trends here, we see that Dying Light in Blue was very strong at the time of release. So hype was strong for Dying Light, but I think we can say competition was average at the time. We like to pick a mid-game milestone for our third marker. For Dying Light, we chose Sightseeing. This is awarded after completing the 7th story mission in the game and will unlock when the player reaches Old Town. How many players are left at this point in the game? For Xbox, it's 36.9%. On PS4, we have 47.4%, and finally for Steam, 48.8% are left. This is a fairly strong decline in players at this point in the game, but all platforms are still doing better than the average. So how did Dying Light do with the critics? Well, Metacritic for PS4 has it at a 74 out of 100. For Xbox, it was also 74 out of 100. And for Steam, the reviews show very positive recent and overwhelmingly positive all time with over 295,000 reviews. These are strong reviews, and you can see that even major review outlets scored Dying Light strong with an average around 74. The reception was good for the game overall. The most important milestone is our fourth one. This is for completing the main story and what we will ultimately base our final score on. It definitely shows how many players finished the game and truly played Dying Light. This milestone is bittersweet, and it's awarded for completing the story on any difficulty. Where does Dying Light end up on the different platforms? On Xbox, 28.5% of players completed the game. For Steam, it was 37.1%, and on PS4, 36.9% did just that. Let's pause here since we reached the end of the game. We want to check the percentage of players that quit each platform after making it through the first milestone but failing to reach game completion. So here, all platforms are doing better than the database average. Regardless of how strong or weak a platform started out, they all had about the same player retention after the first milestone. That's a good sign for Dying Light in terms of how it fared overall, and players across the board really did engage at the same level after they got into the game. Finally, to get a feel for how the completionists treated this game, the rare milestone 5 chosen for Dying Light is called Italian Plumber. This milestone can be achieved if the player can kill an enemy using a wrench after vaulting over an enemy and then performing a drop attack. It also seems that you need a specific type of wrench, that being the pipe wrench, and to have it at full durability. So there's quite a bit that goes into achieving this. For Xbox, we see that 1.8% of players reached this milestone, for PS4 it was 3.4%, and for Steam 2.9% of players did it. Now let's see the full picture. Here are the raw milestones for our platforms for Dying Light. We've also added the database averages for each milestone in gray for comparison purposes. Let's get into it. For Dying Light, we do see the unfortunate Xbox initial drop. However, it's not as strong as others we've seen. Both Steam and PlayStation come out of the gate very strong with hardly any loss in players. As we move to Milestone 2, we see a crazy good hold for players again on all 3 platforms. Dying Light is doing some great work here. Moving out of the early game, we go to Milestone 3, where we do see a very large drop in players, but all still above the average. Then going to the end game for Milestone 4, we actually see another very strong hold, which allows all platforms to end up comfortably above average. We see that PlayStation ultimately comes out best at Milestone 5, with Steam a close second. So this is our final tally for Dying Light milestones. But now let's see how this game stacks up against all other games in our database, and find out if anyone truly played Dying Light. We use Milestone 4 as our ultimate ranking target. Here are the results for each platform for Milestone 4 once again. It's time to reveal the final score Dying Light has in our database. Here we go. Steam is an 8 out of 10, Xbox is a 6 out of 10, and PlayStation is an 8 out of 10. Dying Light has a strong amount of players on Steam and PlayStation, and above average on Xbox. This is a very good result, and shows that the game definitely resonated well with players. So those are the scores, but let's see if we can tease out some other observations by looking at these results in different ways. It's time for the deep dive. Let's start with progressive player loss. Each milestone shows how many total players have stopped playing the game at that particular point. We see the early Xbox loss here, but by Milestone 3 the other platforms are catching up a bit. Steam loses a little bit less throughout the end game than PlayStation does. Moving on, we can look at milestone player retention. This calculation only takes into account the player population loss as a percentage compared to the previous milestone. There is the obvious large Xbox drop at Milestone 1. But right into Milestone 2, Steam has the largest drop. Then Xbox at Milestone 3, and then Steam at Milestone 4. The most interesting thing to note is that all 3 platforms are very close to being statistically the same through the core of the game after Milestone 1. How about completionists? How did the rarest milestones shake out on the different platforms? Here we see PlayStation take 42% of the results, with Steam at 35% and Xbox making up the rest at 22%. It's a pretty even result. Finally, we check on early versus late game retention. When you read a chart like this, the best performers are further away from the center of the circle. Early game, Steam and PlayStation are right on top of each other and exiting my graph, and Xbox is lagging quite a ways behind. For the end game, we actually see that all platforms perform about the same. And finally, for completionists, we see PlayStation slightly pull ahead of the others, but only slightly. Let's take one final look at all the platforms and their Milestone 4 results, but this time we show the full percent rank within our database. This is to give you a detailed view of how the rankings played out. Use this data as you will. Let's wrap this up. So what are our major takeaways from all the data? Dying Light came to gamers with strong hype and solid reviews. Who doesn't like killing zombies? And we see that a lot of gamers did play Dying Light. Steam and PlayStation were the strongest platforms by far, but Xbox was also above average. Early player retention between the first kill of the zombie and finishing the first mission was very good. And continuing that, we see that late game retention was also really great. That happened from Mission 7 to Mission 13. All those ending missions held on to players. But where Dying Light could improve is its mid-game performance. Somewhere between the end of Mission 1 and the end of Mission 7, Dying Light lost half of their players. There is something in that section of the game that kept it from the top layers of our database, so while Dying Light is strong, it could have been even stronger. Dying Light is a very interesting entry in the survival horror genre. Its unique parkour movement and day-night cycles set it apart from other competitors. The co-op functionality makes it easy to play with friends. It had some detractors when it came to story and technical issues, but was reviewed well for its combat and graphics. And based on what we've seen today, clearly a lot of people play Dying Light. It's more a story of how they could have improved it better, and in the future where games can be improved to keep players engaged all the way through to the end. Hopefully this data can help inform better outcomes in the future, and it would be interesting to see what kind of results we see with the sequel to Dying Light. And that's a wrap. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to do all the YouTube support stuff. I'd love to read any comments you have down below. What conclusions did you all take from this data? And of course, feel free to suggest the next game we should look at to determine if anyone played it. Until then, take care of yourself and each other.